Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Unfortunately, Mary couldn't be here, but she will be back at our next month's session. I'm Lisa Cohen. I am the Director of Innovation and Program Design at Harrison's Hope. I am also a caregiver, and I am very excited to be here tonight to introduce our wonderful guest speaker. Welcome, Tanya. We're so happy to have you.
Thank
And
you.
just to give you a brief background on Tanya, she's a psychotherapist with over 30 years of experience supporting children with complex needs and their families. She specializes in trauma, neurodiversity, and attachment with a focus on behaviors that we've seen in aggressive or hard to manage. Tanya is a clinical lead for AFCA, Family Support Program at Interwoven Connections, and also runs her own private practice. Her approach, her approach blends relational regulation-based therapies, including DDP, SMART, and nonviolent resistance. As you guys will probably know, I'm sure Tanya is very popular. She is a sought-after speaker and trainer and is known for her practical insight, humor, and deep commitment to helping caregivers and professionals support vulnerable children and youth. And welcome, Tanya. We're so happy to have you here today. So just a few quick housekeeping things. We're going to do a little bit of a blend of Tanya will talk. If you have questions, please post them in the chat box, and then we'll take periodic breaks to answer some of them. And of course, at the very end, we will have a Q&A where we welcome people to turn on their cameras and interact. We're also going to likely take a few minute break kind of halfway through, give everyone a chance to get up and stretch and move their bodies. And
And pee
I'm
if you're drinking too much, like me.
yes, and I am particularly excited for tonight's topic. Tanya, thank you so much for joining us, and I am going to give you the floor. And if anyone has any questions, please post them in the chat box. I will be checking them as we go.
Thank you, Lisa. So just please do, if you have any questions going along, I ask you not to share any names of kids, and I'm sure you all know that sort of stuff anyway. But I'm fine. I can flex and dodge and do different questions. So Lisa, just interrupt me. Um, I'm coming down with a cold. And I often don't do things after 8 o'clock. So my energy level is not going to be normal. That's okay. I think I can do this, but once I get going, I tend to be okay. And I love talking about polyvagal. So that tends to help a lot. I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint. I've got to remember how to do this. Just a minute. Share screen. Doop, doop, doo. One moment. There. Okay, you can see it right.
Sure can.
Okay, from beginning. I'm in the country. So because I'm in the country, there we go. That can mean that sometimes, so actually, Lisa, if for some reason I just kind of like, freeze or anything like that, let me know. And I'll try to remember what I just said.
Sounds good.
Okay. So I named this What is Polyvagal Theory and How Can It Help? Some of you, I know I recognize some of the names here. Some of you have been in my groups. So some of you, this is going to be a lot of review for. Um, but this is, yeah, I'll explain how I got into this and why I find it useful um, as we go along. So, just wanted to share my journey here. I kind of fell into the FASD world a little bit by accident when I was doing my master's in the around, 2007, 8. I was doing a program up. I was doing a practicum, a community service practicum. And I ended up doing it with an FASD key worker in British Columbia. And I had worked with people with FASD. Heard of it because I'd worked in some child protection situations. Um, but I didn't know much. And when I did this project, I kind of fell in love with the FASD world. And then I was asked to apply for a position when someone went on mat leave and then they didn't come back and I didn't leave for a while. So I was an FASD key worker in British Columbia for a number of years. And when I was doing that, I was able to learn things like sensory processing and how the sensory system works. I wasn't aware of it before that. Learned lots of information about using the brain instead of, or using the body instead of just using language to try to help regulate. I learned a lot about the nervous system impacts of prenatal exposure, um, because that's really important in the FASD world. Lots of other things I learned, and I can honestly say I will be forever grateful for the families in British Columbia that were very patient with my ignorance at the time and helped me get going knowing stuff. And I fell in love with just FASD work and people back then. Moved to Ottawa and was able to help start. When I moved to Ottawa, I was a little shocked that there was nothing really organized or very little organized. I shouldn't say nothing because there were some people that were working very hard to try to do things. I happened to get here at a time when um, so a number of things aligned, and I got to join with some other people to help create the Fetal Alcohol Resource Program in Ottawa, which then was part of the training for the FASD workers across Ontario. I did that for a couple of years. I got that, helped get that going, and then moved into my private practice, which in my private practice, I did some training. Before I did that, I did some training in dyadic developmental psychotherapy. So some of you may have heard of that. Excuse me. I'm going to be doing that a lot, and I apologize. DDP is attachment therapy, and we use it a lot with children who had early childhood trauma. But there were some difficulties doing it with FASD. Um, I learned a lot more about attachment and attachment patterns and what was needed for healthy attachment from both the parent and the child, or the caregiver and the child. Um, so I learned that perfectly safe, wonderful, great caregivers can raise children with attachment problems through no fault of their own and through even with great parenting. I learned more about what co-regulation was about. I learned some things wrong about co-regulation, actually. So that got corrected, I think, with polyvagal for me. Um, and then when I was doing my private practice, it just so happened that, so I started looking into polyvagal just before COVID. And I'd signed up for a class about it. And then in 2020, the class got canceled because of everything. So in 2021, I was able to do the class. It was with Deb Dana, who I'm going to describe a little talk in probably the next slide. And for me, polyvagal just brought together a whole lot of things I'd been learning. And so my experience in the psychology world is what tends to happen is people get a little glimmer, an idea, and it usually they get that idea based on a lot of other people's ideas before them. And then they write a whole book and come up with a whole school of thought. They get a lot of money for it. But often, and the roots of those ideas are lots of other roots of other ideas. So, and I think that's true about polyvagal as well. Polyvagal describes something that Dan Siegel had already described. So, window of tolerance, some of you may have heard of the windows of tolerance. Um, Polyvagal and window of tolerance really are a similar concept, said it with different language. I like polyvagal better because it's talking about our biology. And I think for me that it's, I like the concreteness of that. Um, anyway, in my private practice, I just so happened in about 2022 to have a number of caregivers whose kids were between the ages of 18 and 22. And for those of you in the FASD world, you know there's a specific thing that happens in that age, and that is um, high school stops and people disperse. So all of those things that are somewhat protective also can be very stressful, but can be somewhat protective for a child with FASD, which is routine, structure, people, social, all of those things that are all around, they kind of disappear. Plus, you get these youth with all of the legal abilities, but not necessarily with that dysmaturity thing that happens with FASD, not necessarily the ability to make the good decisions they might need to. So even though your average 18, 19-year-old makes some silly decisions, the level of danger and the vulnerability with people with FASD is much higher. And developmentally at 18, 19, we're supposed to push away from our parents. So I had all these parents in my office who were falling apart with fear because they were so scared for their kids. And understandably, because the threat was real, the danger is real. But I realized when I took this course, this polyvagal course, that maybe if I could help the caregivers, because my belief is from a detachment lens, we have to be the safe place our kids can come back to. They're going to push away, they're going to go and do things, and some of those things are going to be dangerous and scary. But if we do what our gut tells us to and clamp down and stop them from doing anything, when they get a chance to do something, they might not want to come back. And the attachment concept is that we help people go out to some extent and be the safe place they return to when things don't go well. There's lots of, well, I'm not going to get too deeply into that, but that's where I was thinking these were caregivers that needed to learn how to be somewhat regulated, somewhat safe, so that their kids would want to come to them if they got into trouble because they needed help. We knew they needed help. Um, and I also thought if caregivers can be in a room with each other, that's going to be good because we need to do this in community. Excuse me. Pardon me. And I also realized that I'm a therapist, so I don't sound like I really get it as I'm not living it. But I have a colleague who's a really good friend, Nancy, and she lives it. And she had an adult son, so I created these groups. Um, Started having groups with caregivers, and we just went with it, and we did a few groups, and then Interwoven heard about them, and Interwoven decided to hire actually both of us at the time, and I was running the groups in the AFCA. So people who don't know what AFCA is, AFCA stands for Aggression Toward Family and Caregivers in Childhood and Adolescence. It is really common when you have the combination of neurodiversity, attachment trauma or trauma, and um, I'm trying to think about what are the other mental health things. So when we have those sorts of things mixed, aggression is common. It is not an FASD problem, but it's common in FASD. There are lots of people with FASD who do not express AFCA, and there are lots who do. So we noticed it in our FASD world during COVID, and that's kind of what got this study started. So if anyone wants to know more about AFCA, I recommend that you Google AFCA Canada, and you will see our consortium website, which is where this all got started. And now I work with Interwoven specifically in our AFCA team. So that's kind of my journey. And I and other people run polyvagal groups as part of the support. And part of the reason we do that is because we want caregivers to know each other and to know they're not alone. And we also want to help. Actually, it's going to come clear why we do it as I go along. So I'm going to let you answer that or understand that. So the background of polyvagal theory, Stephen Porges is the man who came up with it. These two books are, I think, the two most accessible books for everyone. I don't probably shouldn't say this out loud in public, but I don't love reading Stephen Porges books. He's very sciencey. I am not. So, but this book, Our Polyvagal World, he wrote with his son, and it's really accessible. And Deb Dana's book Anchored is also a really lovely book to understand more about polyvagal theory. And she's the one that she kind of translated Stephen Porges' science into language that I think is really good for everyone. Um, what, second, I feel like nope, I didn't. Okay. What this is really describing is our autonomic nervous system. And there's a lot of language stuff with polyvagal. I don't love all of the language, but because it's very scientific but the concepts are simple. The concepts just make sense. When you hear it, you'll be like, "Oh yeah, that describes something I know." Um, this is a picture, actually, it's a very old picture of our nervous system, the our autonomic nervous system. Autonomic just means you can also say automatic nervous system. It's the part of our nervous system that runs the things that we don't have to think about, our heart rate, our temperature, our digestion, those sorts of things. It runs it. We have some influence on that, but it's going to run things without us. It's designed, it runs things differently when we feel safe than when we are under threat or overwhelmed. So I like this picture because it kind of shows if you look, a lot of nerves up in the head and face. The two sympathetic nerves, are the ones that go down the spine. And then this is our digestive system. And this is really very important about the dorsal vagal. So that's going to come up in a minute. This is how Deb Dana describes it. She uses a ladder. So she says the three, and I like this because the nerves at the top um, are ventral vagal or our nerves that are kind of running and organizing everything, the whole system when we feel safe. So those are the safe, social, engaged nerves. Basically, when that's running things, we can be social. We're letting down our guard. We are feeling at ease, but on. I can manage, can have creative thought. My executive functioning is working as well as it can. So that's what it's like when we're feeling safe. As soon as we perceive threat, we move down the ladder into the sympathetic nerves, the ones that go down the spine and out towards our arms and legs. And that's when we're activated to protect ourselves. That's our fight, flight, or freeze. We all know that. We've all heard about fight, flight, or freeze. It's a specific freeze. It's the freeze like a deer in headlights. So the freeze, but I could take off in a second. My heart is racing, but I'm invisible, and it's a protective state because if I'm invisible, you may not notice me, right? It's a protection thing. We have lots of kids who use that state. And when there's danger, they get really quiet but if you could measure their heart rate, it's high. There is mobilized energy in that state. The attitude is activated. I'm having a hard time keeping up. I feel anxious and irritated. The world seems dangerous, chaotic, and unfriendly. And then at the bottom of the ladder, the nerves that go actually from the back of the brainstem down in through they connect to things like, I believe, our lungs. I'm just reading some more books about this. And they connect to our digestive system. Those are the ones this is the part that Stephen Porges brought into the story that we weren't really naming before. And this is dorsal vagal overwhelm, where we get actually shut down, numb, collapsed. Again, it's a protective system. It's it happens. I see in caregivers, it happens a lot from exhaustion. When we run out of cortisol and adrenaline, and we need to shut down. Right now, because I'm getting sick, and because it's the end of the day, I should be more dorsal. But I'm pushing myself into sympathetic to have the energy to do this. We can manage that. We've got that flexibility to do that. But I'll need to sleep a little more because of what this is costing. It's not a high price tag, but just a description of what that's about. So the description, I like her description. I'm buried under a huge load and I cannot get out. I'm alone in my despair. The world is empty, dead, and dark. I know every caregiver I've ever connected with, just about, recognizes that state. That feels familiar, and it's not named often. Fight and flight are named, but this collapse state is not named. And naming it is really actually quite powerful and knowing what to do about it. Um, so these are, I'm okay. I'm excited about this. You are the first people seeing on the left of your screen. Um, this implementation guide is about to come out. This is something that Nancy and I have been working hard on for the past 4 or 5 months. And it's to teach people how to run the groups that we started years ago and that we do in at Interwoven. So there's 6 90-minute groups. They're for caregivers and professionals, and they're just teaching the basics about polyvagal. They help people to know what's going on inside. Because when you don't know, there's a lot of self-blame and shame about your own behavior. They also help people understand what's going on for their kids and why their kids behave the way they do. And we do teach a lot of practical things, and I'm always learning new ones for how to recover from stress and threat response. So I'm excited about this. It should be coming out. I think I have 2 more things to correct tomorrow morning, and I think it's going to come out within the next day or two. So look at our the Interwoven website should probably have more information when it comes out. And this is how we are now framing that ladder. I like a tree. I just think for me and for a lot of our people, it is to me, it looks more like what that nervous system looked like. So the safety up in leaves of the tree, the top of the tree, that sympathetic, those nerves, the strength, that mobilized energy coming from the spine and the dorsal vagal, the quietness um, underneath the earth, the collapse place. So this is kind of some of the imagery that we're going to be using going forward. Pardon me. What I love about polyvagal is for our caregivers, it reframes behavior as predictive. Now, I'm talking to FASD caregivers. I bet you've all advocated one way or another about your child's behavior, as you all know that sometimes when your child is misbehaving, they're doing it because they're overwhelmed and they're stressed and they need support. That's really the same thing. But the thing is, as caregivers, we often don't understand that for ourselves. We rarely give ourselves the same grace that we give our kids. And that's what I think is really important. And I think it really shifts things for caregivers because the self-judgment and self-criticism interferes with our ability to recover from the stress that you all have to manage. So, specifically, and I know you all know this, what are the things, and you could add to this list, what are the things that steal our feeling of safety in our FASD world? So, having an invisible disability, right, is really difficult because even people with FASD and people supporting FASD don't understand what's actually happening, can't see it. You can describe it, you can see the effects of it, but you don't, and sometimes it takes a long time to put two and two together and go, oh, that's what that was about. We've all had that experience. The invisible disability is a challenge. I was just in a meeting today with someone who their child is living somewhere and the people just don't get it. And you know that. I've heard that term used so much by people. They just don't get it. And on the other side, what's it like when they get it? That experience of talking to someone and you know right away, oh my gosh, they get it. And the relief. We know that prenatal alcohol exposure damages the nervous system. And then trauma impacts it as well. And so we know that prenatal alcohol exposure means a system that has a higher resting cortisol rate. We know that, excuse me, there's a faster responses and sometimes it's slower to calm. Are there any questions? I see that there are little comments coming out. Are there any questions that need to?
They're just comments right now. Someone's saying that they're always changing the terminology.
Yes, yeah. True. We know that impulse control is huge. It's really difficult. I call it brain breaks. Our kids don't have good brain breaks, right? They're driving a car without the brakes. And so when they get an idea, they do it. And sometimes we just can't outthink that as caregivers and we can't prepare for it. I remember, actually, I probably shouldn't tell stories today. I'm not going to tell stories today because this is a really big audience. And you never know, someone might know the kids. But um, I have some good old stories of kids who just impulsively did things, and they make sense when you see it afterwards, but you couldn't predict it because just the way their vision of the world is beautiful and interesting, and sometimes because it doesn't follow the same rules, it's dangerous. Poor system fit is exhausting. It's exhausting for kids, it's exhausting for caregivers. The amount of advocacy and shut doors and lack of understanding and disappointment by systems is probably harder, I think, for most of our caregivers than the actual act of raising and supporting an individual. I'm going to say supporting FASD because I think supporting the individual is easy. Supporting the FASD part can sometimes be challenging, and we can't pull those two apart, which is really difficult. Um, Judgment. And then when I say judgment, I agree. I also say self-criticism. Judgment by others, perceived judgment, and self-criticism. We as parents are hard on ourselves. We are really, I invite everyone to learn about self-compassion. Kristen Neff is um, writes about self-compassion. And I really think that understanding our nervous system opens up our ability to have self-compassion better because we become less judgmental about our own responses because we realize they're trying to protect us. Our caregivers become isolated. We all know it takes a village, and we all know that in the FASD world, the village doesn't get bigger, it gets smaller. It needs to be bigger, but it is smaller. And let's face it, our society is not good at village anymore. When I was a child, there were village. I knew everyone in my neighborhood. I could go anywhere. I would know where I could go if I had a problem. I don't know that in my own neighborhood that I live in now. It's very different these days. And then the aggression piece is also really important. It's really common. We see it a lot. I want to say it's not, I don't like using the word normal, but I do want to say it's far more prevalent than we ever imagined. Not just in the FASD world, but it is far more prevalent than we ever imagined. We see and interwoven hundreds of families who live with aggression. And here's the part that was really important to me. When I learned about DDP and that attachment therapy, the flaw that I found was the message for caregivers was you need to bring felt safety. You need to be safe. You need to be the safe and bring safety to the relationship, which is true. But when you put aggression in the mix, I cannot physiologically feel safe when someone is threatening me. Biologically, that is not possible. So what do you do with that? That is really hard. And that's what we're trying to sort out and figure out and get ideas about in our interwoven program. And we have some, but it is not perfect and it does not end the aggression. For some of our families, it's gotten somewhat better, but it does not fix aggression. And that's really hard. Aggression is, for some people, just going to be there, maybe for a lifetime, maybe for a while. Okay. But I want to remind you, and this is important, that FASD or not, none of us behave well under threat. When I am driving stressed, my car sounds differently on the inside than it does when I'm driving relaxed. There are different words that are used. The speed may be different in my car. I may drive differently. I don't behave as well as I do when I'm relaxed and I'm feeling okay. None of us behave as well under threat. And I think we have to remember that's just a human thing. That's not an FASD thing. That's human. Um, Literally, when we're under threat biologically, and I'm going to talk a little more about this, we change and we cannot be the same. And the other thing that's really important is when I'm under threat, I'm not looking at what's going on inside of me. I'm looking out there for more danger. In service of survival, I need to look for danger. I don't need to look inside it. What's going on? And that's so we can, and you know, with your kids, they can be doing stuff and be totally oblivious to what they're bringing to the table, but they can point out what everyone else is doing wrong. We actually do the same thing. We're just kind of more subtle about it sometimes, but we do tend to blame a lot when we're stressed. So, any questions so far that we're good still?
Don't see any questions yet.
Okay, good. Okay. And again, rip them out if you got them. So, two really important basics. Excuse me, sorry. Neuroception is a Stephen Borges concept, and it is the fact that my nervous system can read your nervous system without me thinking about it. It's like perception, but I'm not using my conscious brain to do it. I can walk into a room, and then if everyone is stressed in that room, I'm going to arm up without thinking about it because my body can read danger in the room, lots of subtle cues, and within a fraction of a second, I will arm up to protect myself. It's a beautiful system of survival. And think about that in relationship. If our child walks into the room and they're really, really stressed, we can tell. But are we able to stay calm or do we start to arm up? Right? We can tell they're stressed, so we start to arm up. That's how relationship works. It's a really efficient way to protect danger. Also, then you can end up going. So, for example, if you know that your child comes home or gets up in the morning grumpy, isn't it hard to walk into their room calm to wake them up? Do you arm yourself up before you walk into the room? So then you walk into the room armed up, and then they wake up and they can feel how you're armed up, and they know, uh-oh, they kind of their brain, without thinking about it, is going, am I in trouble? What's going on? Right? So then they get reactive. So there's a loop that happens between people. Important to know. Good information. And there's things we can do about it. Co-regulation. I'm going to go back to that co-regulation thing. We are not meant to do this stuff alone. We do better co-regulating. We're meant to do stuff within relationship. We're meant to calm and be safe in community. Um, so first of all, being regulated doesn't mean being calm. Um, that's really important to know. We've been taught wrong. Being calm, if there is an emergency and you're calm, that might not be a good match. I learned a long time ago, I had a health issue that made me feel very, very
What's that?
stressed. Yeah, sorry. Hey, Stephanie. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Um, sorry about that. When there's something scary happening, we want our alert system to go off. Um, that's actually regulated for the situation. When it's a birthday party and things are exciting, we want to be excited. That's regulated for the situation. Um, Dysregulated is not matching the situation. So when I feel afraid, but things are actually safe, that's dysregulated. So that matters if our child is really upset and we're calm, we're mismatched. And for the child, I actually want you to think about it. Think about being really, really upset about something and going to someone and talking about it, and they're very calm. Is there a chance you might feel like you're not listening? You don't get it. You don't care. I don't matter to you. And where I see this, there's a really good example of it is if you have a little person and they fall down, a little like 2 or 3 year old, and they fall down and hurt themselves, and they get up and they cry, and someone goes, "Oh, it wasn't a big deal." They often cry harder because they have to show you, yes, it was, and I need you to help me. But if someone falls down and you go, "Oh my goodness, I saw you fall. Are you okay? Do you need a hug? Let me see. Did you scratch yourself?" Then the child is witnessed, co-regulated, and then they can go off and play again. So co-regulation is matching intensity without matching. So if someone's angry, it's not being angry with them. It's being intense with them. So going, "Oh my gosh, this really matters to you. I said something that really upset you. Let's figure it out." There's ways to show intensity without matching the mood, which is really important because angry plus angry goes kaboo. So, oh, right. I was going to get someone to change the slide, but it's me. All right. So, um, when we're looking at the ladder of the tree, the top of the tree is safety. It's called ventral vagal. Those are the nerves that go actually from the front of our brain stem. They go down to our heart and up our neck, behind our ears, behind our eyes, in our face. They help with expression. They help with a number of different things. When we feel safe, we can be in ventral vagal. So what Dan Siegel calls that window of tolerance, that's ventral vagal, right? And for some of us, that window of tolerance is very small. And if you've never known real safety with a grown-up, it's almost impossible to feel safe with a grown-up. It takes a long time to learn. Doesn't matter how safe the grown-up is. It takes a long time for our nervous system to go, "You are safe." So co-regulation might need to start with nature. I work with a boy whose first co-regulation was with a horse, right? How many of us, because we've been around so many people that have not supported us when they need, don't want to be around people right now because we're afraid, we're on guard because we don't know what they're going to say. So we'd rather go sit by a lake or go for a walk in the woods. When we're in ventral vagal, our whole system is working. All of the systems, sympathetic and dorsal, it's all working together. It's running our whole body, our heart rate, our digestion, all of those things are working. Our executive functioning is in line. We can imagine, we can plan, we can be creative, we can see options, all of those things. It's all working. We feel good. And our guard is down so we can connect. I can connect with another person when I feel safe. I don't have any of my um, defenses up. Um, when I come back, I don't think I've made notes about this, but I hope I can remember to talk a little bit about, if you can remind me, Lisa, when I get to the dorsal sympathetic loop, I want to talk about what safety is about, what it's like. Okay, sympathetic, right? That's that part. We often call it stress or anxiety, right? Sympathetic is where the anxiety lives. It's when we perceive a threat. Now, it doesn't have to be a real threat. It reminds us of a previous threat, something about often our sensory system. So we have this thing called our amygdala. Actually, I think this is another slide, but anyway, sorry about this. It can be a physical threat, emotional threat, a social threat. There's a number of different things that are perceived as threats. In fact, social and emotional threats often have a bigger impact than physical threat. Um, those are the nerves that travel down to both sides of our spine and then outwards. And vagal just means wandering, so it's not like there's one nerve. It's like it's a system. Um, So yes, I knew I had it. So what happens, the physical actual response in sympathetic is in our brain, we have an amygdala. It's a very small part of our brain in the very center of our brain. When I'm talking to kids, I call it Amy brain. Thank you, Kim Barthel, for that language. And Amy brain is like our alarm system. It receives information from our senses, and those if they connect to a past threat. So if there's a smell that reminds us of a past threat, if there's a sound, a tone of voice, then our brain is always trying to predict in order to keep us safe. Then it's going to that information will help it predict, oh, this could be dangerous. So it's going to send a signal to our HPA axis, which is our hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal gland, and we get this cascade of adrenaline and cortisol that creates an actual physical shift in how our systems run. So our biology changes, the way our body runs changes. So what does that feel like? Our heartbeat rises, our breathing changes. The smallest muscle in our body is in our inner ear. It shifts how we hear things. So, sorry for the people who've already heard this. How many of you have heard your child say, "You're yelling at me," when you're not? But what did you do? Probably you started using a stern voice. Your tone changed into a more threatening. So our hearing shifts and amplifies certain kinds of sounds in service of survival in order to protect us. It's listening for danger. And so it amplifies your voice and it sounds like yelling. And sometimes we don't have language for what that is. So hearing actually shifts, our vision shifts. Okay, let me tell you a cool thing that I learned. This is a cool little trick. Perseveration, it's going to come up again in this, but we know that perseveration is part of FASD. It's actually just part of being a human. We all, when we're stressed, perseverate. It's just a little more obvious sometimes in FASD. Is that stuck on something and we know over time we learn it's not about whatever the brain is stuck on. It's actually just a dysregulated brain. But I learned this trick. So our vision narrows when we get stressed. And a really cool way to get the brain to shift out of that stress is actually to try to attract vision to peripheral. Is that the right word? Or peripheral?
Peripheral.
That's it, right?
Peripheral.
Peripheral. Peripheral. Thank you. Peripheral. Thank you. Wow. Peripheral vision. So in a session with a guy that I see, he was perseverating with the beginning of a session. He was actually talking to someone across a table and he was upset. And I could tell by the conversation what he was talking about was not what he was upset about. He was just upset. He was stuck. And so I said, "Do you mind if I try something?" I said, "I'm just going to go beside you and I want you to tell me when you can see my hand." And this guy's a hockey player, so peripheral vision really matters. And so I just did that. I just did, "Can you see it? When can you, oh, you can't see it anymore? Wow, that's, you can really see it. Okay, I'm going to just go around behind you and I'm going to do the other side." He totally shifted. It stopped the perseveration. It downshift or upshift, whatever. It shifted him out of that stuck stress place. And we had a conversation. Now, this is not going to work every single time, but man, it's useful to have tricks like that up your sleeve sometimes. So, and it's useful for us too. If you're really stuck, you're really stressed, and you'd start just noticing what you can see on the sides of your vision, just by noticing your peripheral vision, you're going to shift your nervous system towards safety. With sympathetic comes a lot of mobilized energy. That's really important to know. Um, and we'll get back to that as well. That is specifically what you notice the most in. Like I'm using my sympathetic system to give me the energy tonight. Totally fine.
Tanya, I just want to interrupt you because there is one
Yeah.
question from Karen. So Karen asked, can you speak to how children with trauma may perceive threat or danger when there may not be, and how
Yep.
co-regulation can be very challenging?
Okay. We all perceive danger when it's not there. That's actually common. So again, sorry for the people who've been in my groups because I tell the story a lot. I don't like the sound of vacuum cleaners because of childhood experiences. Um, and so when a vacuum cleaner, I'm actually getting better because but when a vacuum cleaner would go on, I would have a stress response. I was perfectly safe. But because I was reminded of old dangers, my body would go into a stress response. The hard part for so many of our kids is what brought the danger on was either unsafe adults or not being able to feel safe with adults. So by that I mean, imagine a child who starts life in the NICU, right? An infant completely helpless, completely dependent on others, and their primary job is to co-regulate and to be have their needs met and safety given so they can learn to trust. But biologically, there's a threat in the way of doing that because of whatever health thing is happening. They're in a NICU, and every time a human comes by them, something happens that is uncomfortable. It might hurt. It might feel dangerous. The child can get out of the NICU and go home with their biological parents, who are perfectly good, capable, lovely people, probably feel a little bit scared because they've just been through the experience of their child in a NICU. And that child doesn't know how to relax and feel safe with those adults because their amygdala learned even in that time was adults bring danger because they couldn't understand differently. Imagine if you have a disorganized sensory system. And we don't, when we have little people with disorganized sensory systems, we don't know what's going on. They don't come out with a label on them saying, when people touch me, it hurts. Or when I have too much light, it hurts my head. I get overwhelmed. We don't know. We have to figure that out. But in the meantime, we have these little people who are experiencing too much and they feel unsafe, even though they are safe. Their nervous system is not giving them the right information. So you can have a perfectly safe adult trying to co-regulate, but if we can't read what's going on and give the right message, then that child can't receive it. If a child spends that first part of their life where they're supposed to be learning trust and safety and dependence and that I can go to people when I have a problem, like I'm hungry or I have to go to the bathroom, if they haven't had people that were able to be there, they may not, they may, it's really much harder to learn that later because our nervous system is really developing so much when we're really, really little. Does that answer the question okay? I mean, there's a lot more to it, but that's part of it. Um, okay. So if you think about it, when you're under stress, what are other people and ourselves, what are we hearing? We're hearing raised voices or sharper or deeper tones. We might be perseverating, all of us. I've been stuck. I call it stuck brain all the time. Grumpiness. I don't like myself when I'm stressed. I don't enjoy being in my own head when I'm stressed. Rigidity, aggression. So it's that fight, flight, freeze, but that specific deer in headlights freeze. That's what we see and what we feel. And the story we tell ourselves about ourselves is really important because when we're safe, that's when we are ourselves. That's like, I am my most self-like self when I'm safe. But if you're under stress a lot, you can start to feel like, oh, this must be who I am. And that's not true. This is me under stress. This is me under threat trying to protect myself. This is not me. But we can start to feel really awful about ourselves. We're grumpier. We have a shorter fuse. We have a harder time thinking creatively and problem solving. And we don't like ourselves. We don't get to parent in a way we wanted to parent when we're stressed. But we are legitimately feeling threat and experiencing threat. So dorsal vagal, this is the part that's new. This is the part that Dr. Porges brought to the conversation that had not been discussed or understood well before polyvagal theory. We knew about fight, flight, and freeze, but we didn't understand dorsal. So dorsal vagal is actually, those are um, nerves that go from the back of our brain stem down through our diaphragm to our digestive system. They hit on a couple of other places on the way. It's why we feel sick, why we have I'm guarantee everyone in this audience has had digestive problems. My son, who really struggled with school, would throw up on his way to school almost every day. That was just a stress response. When we're dorsal vagal, and that can happen in sympathetic. Our digestive system starts going offline in sympathetic. When we're in dorsal vagal, that's where we feel depressive-like symptoms. That feels like depression. It's a shutdown, a collapse kind of place. It's what happens either when we're under such severe life threat that our amygdala decides to use a shutdown response to keep us safe, or because we have run out of cortisol and adrenaline and we're exhausted, which I find happens because there are too many layers of stress for too long without any recovery into safety. We get to dorsal vagal and we can get really stuck there. So what the physical response is that our heart rate actually lowers. Our breathing slows and we feel that heaviness, that exhausted heaviness. So our thinking and awareness clouds, we can't think. Um, we can't feel our actual physical sensation. Interestingly, what is happening is our brain is protecting us from attack by not letting us feel pain. So literally, we don't feel things the way we do normally. Our digestion is quite severely shut down and impaired. We get that exhausted, low motivation people. That's where we have, oh gosh, I'm losing the word. Sorry, this is late at night for me. So that's when I really lose words. Dissociation. Those people who just like dissociate a lot had to be more that and a feeling of hopelessness. We have people who faint here. So this is the freeze with collapse or faint. Um, if you think about it, you've probably heard people talk about being under attack and not fighting back and struggling with shame around that. But what's actually happened, it's not about not being brave. What it is their brain didn't give them a choice. It drives me crazy when I hear people go, "Oh, if I was there, I would have fought back." Because no one knows that. Because our amygdala makes that decision for us. It makes a fraction of a second decision how to respond to a particular threat. And if it goes dorsal, it does that because the sense is you're safer in dorsal than you are if you fight or run away. And there's a really cool video. I thought about showing it, but I couldn't figure out how to get it on my video on my slideshow because I'm really not that good with technology. There's a really interesting video of a cheetah chasing an impala. And it actually brings the impala down. The impala gets exhausted, the cheetah brings it down, starts to actually, the cheetah, because it's had to run so hard, it's taking a moment to kind of breathe and get its energy back. And a hyena comes along. So the impala is down, it's collapsed. The cheetah is just, we're taking a break, and a hyena comes along to start to take over with the impala. And then the cheetah gets upset and they chase each other off, and the impala jumps up and runs away. That's how dorsal vagal protects us. It makes us collapse so we can regain enough energy to get back into sympathetic to protect ourselves and get away, to either fight or run away. It's a protective thing. It's not bad. It is not failure. It feels like failure. It is not failure. It feels like failure because we can't accomplish anything. But it is not failure. It's our body telling us we need to rest. We need to protect ourselves by shutting down. To others and inside our head, it looks like a lack of interest or a lack of enthusiasm. People who don't want to go to a party. You don't want to go to a party when you're in dorsal because the worst thing is to hang out with happy people. That's why people who are depressed don't want to hang out with other people because the contrast feels awful. There's a dullness. Um, People who are often late too or missing appointments, they don't get paperwork in. They're really just struggling to get stuff done. The laundry keeps piling up, the dishes are piling up, and they just can't. They're not getting anything accomplished, which then the problem is there's a shame involved in that feeling of because we're in a society where we're supposed to get stuff done. We have all these expectations and look at everyone else on Instagram getting all that stuff done and figuring out all their systems, and we're just failing. And so the shame piece actually drives us more into dorsal and makes it even harder to get stuff done. And so we isolate. We don't want to be around people and we isolate, which actually makes it even harder to recover. Does that sound familiar to people? I'm guessing that probably anyone here has had periods of this. Okay. So sympathetic dorsal loop is really, actually, let's see. Where are we time-wise? I'm actually doing okay, and it's 9. I don't, do people need a break or are we okay? I'm kind of shocked that I think I'm really okay to keep going if people want. So if anyone wants to take a break, I mean, you're all at home and you don't have your cameras on. You can take a break if you need to.
Looks like
So,
some people are saying all good to keep going.
okay. So the sympathetic dorsal loop is really important. And this is something I see a lot. Of the people that come to my group, most of them are in a sympathetic dorsal group, a dorsal loop when they start. The sympathetic dorsal loop is I am under stress, uh, hypervigilant, and then I get exhausted and I collapse into dorsal. I get enough rest to be able to push myself back into sympathetic, but then I stress, and I drop back into dorsal and never get up to feeling safe. And the interesting thing that happens is, and I learned this early on when I was taking the course and learning about this at a client that I used to meet. And I love this story because it was during COVID, so we couldn't meet in an office. So I found a really great parking lot beside some water, and it was springtime. Her kids were back in school. She was with me. She'd known me for quite a long time, and it was a beautiful day. And I was talking about safety, and I said, like, so right now, how do you feel? And she said, "Oh, I can't feel that way because something might happen." That is a sign of hypervigilance and a sympathetic dorsal loop. Because in that moment, that's dysregulation. She was safe. She was with someone she was safe with. She was in a place that was safe. Her kids were somewhere that was safe. Even if they weren't safe, in that moment, she couldn't have done anything about that. She was safe, but she wouldn't let herself feel safety because she'd actually started feeling, and this probably will sound familiar, like if I let my guard down, something bad will happen. Right? That's really common. And the difficulty is it's a misbelief because if you think about when I'm safe, I can actually think better, plan better, do better. I'm recovering my strength enough to be safe. But if I never get there, if I stay hyper vigilant, I'm exhausting myself. Are there questions there? I'm
So
seeing.
there's one person, Tanya said that happened to me recently, and Lori just shared it's like that feeling of waiting for the next shoe to drop.
Waiting for the other shoe to drop. You got it.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's normal. Like we all have felt that. It's really common. But the problem is it's dysregulated and it's taking so the sickness that I had, which is a number of years ago, was I was there. I was hypervigilant. My body just shut me down. It said enough already and it stopped me. It actually really it's very hard on us to keep up being hypervigilant. And every time we can get to safety, and I'm going to get there in a minute, we're recovering a little bit. We're able to gather a little bit of strength. Um, so things that I see is a fear relaxing and not being ready for that next crisis. We need to use the energy from that sympathetic to get stuff done, like I'm doing right now, right? I'm using my sympathetic energy to get this done, to get me to, um, that happens. We have that in our life. You have kids, you have things to do. You've got to, that's normal. And after this, I need to rest. But we don't always give ourselves, we don't always have time. We don't always have the space to rest. So I'm going to give you some little things about this in a minute. We also sometimes want to avoid the disappointment when we feel so this is what I wanted to come up with. One of the difficulties when you've been in a sympathetic dorsal loop for a long time is when you actually allow yourself to feel safe. One of the things that comes rushing in is grief because you realize you haven't felt safe in a long time. And this life of trying to work in systems that don't fit and advocate for your kid and understand FASD and all of the things and live life in a world that's kind of crazy and falling apart right now, you feel the grief of not of how much you haven't felt safe for how long. Very frequently, when the first time I talk about safety in my groups, there are tears because people realize how long it's been. And for some people, it's really hard to remember feeling safe because some of us didn't start out safe. Um, so we avoid disappointment of the disappointment of feeling safe and then losing that feeling again because we can't stay there. Now, I want to just also acknowledge the fact that our society gives us this really, really ridiculous message that we're supposed to feel safe and happy all the time, and if we don't, something's wrong. That is not true. In a normal day for anyone, a good day, we should be actually moving up and down that tree or that ladder. And I wake up on a normal day pretty dorsal. I move up the ladder. I get to safety. By the afternoon, I might have a client or something that's kind of stressful or meetings. By the afternoon, I'm dropping back into dorsal again. And then, I kind of come home. I love to cook. I regulate in the kitchen at dinner time. I'm up there kind of feeling okay again. Then by 8 o'clock, I'm usually back down hitting dorsal again. I really am not complaining. But I'm just describing what that's my normal, that's a normal healthy, it's normal to, it's okay to go up and down. We are not supposed to feel good and safe and jolly and happy all the time. That is not actually a sign of good mental health. We also avoid dorsal by staying in that. We try to push ourselves into sympathetic because we just don't have time or we don't give ourselves time to collapse. Because again, our society doesn't feel comfortable with depression, doesn't feel okay. It feels like we see it as a form of failure and it is not. It's just information. So this is something that I really believe, and I wanted to put this in care. If caregivers aren't okay, our kids won't be okay. That's an attachment piece. That's a that's that nervous system. Neuroception piece. If our kids, if we're not okay, our kids can't get okayness from us. So it really matters for us to try to figure out some okayness. So what can we do? The first one is the hardest, I think. Although I'm learning better things. Supporters really matters. Getting to know being part of a community like Harrison's Hope, like Interwoven, where there are people who get it. Even if it's just a phone call or an online meeting, knowing and having time where you're not alone really matters. But asking people for simple little things really matters. We're not very good at it, but we need to. Um, Learning how to listen to our body and our nervous system, it's talking to us, and we try really hard to ignore it. We've been taught often to ignore it. We've been taught not to listen to what's going on and not to trust ourselves. But our nervous system is trying to tell us what it needs. Our sympathetic and our dorsal system need very different things to recover. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And we start with glimmers. Glimmers is a term in polyvagal, and it's just a lovely, I used to not like the term, mostly because I don't like things that are sparkly or pink, but that's okay. Glimmers don't have to be sparkly and pink. Um, Glimmers are things that give us moments of joy. They are what I call kind of oxygen to your soul, like a little hit of oxygen to your soul. Um, so glimmers can be one of the things I do when I do my groups at the end of the first group, which is always the heaviest group because we tell our stories. I say we spend 10 minutes and so I'm going to get you to do this right now. I'd like you all to stop for a moment and think, what's your favorite smell? So if we were all together, I would then say, I would watch your faces because what I love doing is watching people's faces because immediately when you hit on a smell, most people get a smile. And then I want you to think, so with that smell, is there a story around that smell? And is that a story of safety? Because we store safety in our bodies just like we store trauma. And we can access it. You don't even have to smell the smell. We can just remember the smell, know what the smell is and the story around it, and access that safety. And when we share those stories with each other, we co-regulate. It's very fun, very simple. Um, Glimmers are my favorite song coming on the radio. Glimmers are, I love the sound of snow in an evening, quiet evening when it's snowing. Although it's April tomorrow, so no more. Now I'm gonna get glimmers when the flowers start peeping up out of the soil that is mostly out of not under snow anymore. The birds are coming out. Birds are cool. Here's a neat thing about birds. When you can hear birds, it means things are safe. So if you biologically, if you're in the woods and you can hear birds, your brain is knowing that there's safety. Because if you think about it, when the birds stop, what does that mean? It means there's danger. There's a predator, there's danger. So there's when you know that and you're listening for birds, it gives you this extra layer of, oh, that's a sign of safety. And it kind of it's very cool. Um, Let me think about some other ones. There's just a lot of things. Glimmers can be, what mug do I want to drink my tea out of? What shirt do I will feel really good today? Taking the time to listen to what do I want in the simple things. Those are glimmers. And they're all around us, but most of the time we're too busy in the sympathetic dorsal loop to notice the glimmers. But every time we notice a glimmer and we sit with it even for a few seconds, we're giving our nervous system a hit of safety and it's recovery. And every recovery we do is building strength because you have to endure a lot. In the FASD world, whether you're living with it in your body or you're supporting it, you have to endure a lot. It's a hard road. It's challenging, full of challenges. And we have to find strength where we can. And we feel stronger when we're in sympathetic because of that mobilized energy, but over time we get weakened. Every time we recover with a glimmer, we're actually building strength. So that's what glimmers are. I can go for a dog walk in the morning and not notice glimmers because I'm in my head worrying about my day. Or I can look around and smell. Sensory things are often really great ways to find our glimmers. Sight, smell, sounds, those sorts of things. Um, in the sympathetic, we need a different thing. So in order to recover, move up that tree, we need to use some sort of energy to move through a stress response. So if you've been through something really stressful, so for example, like that day where I had that really hard day and then I had that phone call that I had to make, I could have just gone to bed. That would have been calm, except I had that energy. I had to get rid of the cortisol and adrenaline were in my system, and we can trap it there. But if we can do something active, because it's meant to be sympathetic is meant to have fight or flight, it's meant to have movement. So there are movements we can do to help get through a stress response, even if we can't do it in the moment. Because we know we can't. Sometimes we can be really stressed, but have to be still and quiet. So afterwards, we can still do things. So bilateral rhythmic movement is really good. Walking, running, dancing, shaking. Um, those sorts of things are really, really good. If you've had to remain silent, your voice, sing, scream into a pillow, use your voice, hear your voice. Humming is really good. Humming is actually really effective for because when we hum, we vibrate against the ventral vagal nerves in our neck. And if we plug our ears when we hum, we actually make more resonance within our head and the nerves. So cool little tricks. Progressive muscle relaxation, if anyone's heard of it, if you haven't heard of it, there's lots of progressive muscle relaxation exercises on YouTube. Now, they're useful, but we can level them up. And the way we level them up is basically progressive muscle relaxation is tensing and relaxing muscles in order going down or going up our body. And you can up the ante on that by when you tense, you can think of something really stressful. And then when you relax, you can release it. And when we do that, so doing this right before bed can be a really useful way to go through the stressors of the day and let them go and actually work some of the cortisol and adrenaline out of our body and relax so we can sleep. Really useful after if you can't go somewhere or do something, if you do 10 minutes of progressive muscle relaxation, you can do a lot for yourself. Taking a breath, there's a lot of different important things about taking a breath. And breathing, there are some people for whom breathing is not useful yet because we can actually, if we don't breathe correctly, we can actually activate our sympathetic nervous system. But one of the most useful breaths is, there's a name for it, but I can't remember what it is. Pardon me, sorry, is taking a deep breath, um, then taking another little one, and then a long exhale as long as you can. So on the exhale, um, when we exhale, we actually lower our heart rate. Now, if we're stuck in that sympathetic dorsal loop, it might not lower very much because, well, I'm not going to go into it. So, but practicing will really help. But breathe in ways that work for you. So even right now, I suggest you just put your feet on the floor. If you're sitting somewhere where you can put your feet on the floor, feel your bottom in your seat and just move a little bit in a way that works for you. And just breathe. It's funny. If I breathe too much, I'm going to cough, so I'm not going to do that. Okay, I'm going to do it. But don't be afraid to look into different ways because when we do long exhales, again, we're breathing out things like some of those stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Sorry, I feel like I'm getting quiet. I'm going to go to the next one. Dorsal. We need very different things when we're in dorsal. One of the things that people will often try to do when they see us in dorsal is they'll try to cheer us up. Worst feeling in the world. Most of the time, people try to cheer us up because they're uncomfortable. And that's not something that I'm saying judgmentally. We've been raised not to be comfortable with dorsal. But learning how to hold space for someone when they're in dorsal is really important. And holding space just means I can see you're in it. I'm not going to leave you alone. I'm not going to try to fix it, but I'm not going to leave you alone. And I believe that in time you're going to feel better. But I'll make you a cup of tea, or I'll make you a cup of hot chocolate, or we can just sit here quietly. Um, I often say to treat yourself like you're sick because that is kind of we are. When we're sick and we need to recover, we need to be good to ourselves. We need to drink water. We need to we need to lower our energy demands. This is where you learn how to say no. If you know you're in dorsal, it's really important to be able to say no. And sometimes our community are really bad at saying no because we have so many things and we see so much pain and we want to help. And if we feel resentful when we're helping or hurting relationship and we're hurting ourselves. And so saying no if we're actually in collapse mode and we need to recover is really important. And choose the people to talk to and be with who can hold hope in their body, but not try to pull you up to where they are at. Just be with you. So, see, ooh, I've done okay. So overall, let's see. When we learn to listen to what our nervous system is saying and work with it, we tend to move through stress and not become stuck in that loop. It's interesting. My friend Nancy, who's done these groups with me, she has a really lot going on in her life. And what did she say to me recently? Oh, she was not able to do yoga. She's able to do yoga. She used to do Roomba. No, Roomba is a vacuum cleaner. That was funny. Zumba.
Zumba.
There we go. She used to do Zumba, thanks. And because that was where she was at. But now, after practicing this over time, she's actually learned she can do yoga. And that's a sign that she's healing. Her life is still pretty crazy, but her nervous system is learning to recover from the stress better. It's becoming a little more elastic. So none of our stress response systems are bad or represent dysregulation unless they're not matching the need or the demand. Um, I love self-care. I'm sure everyone here doesn't like the term self-care. It is such a trigger for so many people. So we often say restorative time or restoration to safety. Think of self-care, or when people say self-care, it is not about a bubble bath. It is about listening to your nervous system and what it needs. It might be a bubble bath, but it might just be a completely different thing. It might be a walk. It might be sitting outside. It might be taking a deep breath of cool. Um, and we know that living with FASD or supporting someone with FASD is very stressful. So we're going to be using those stress responses. That is just normal. And it's not failure. It's failure on the part of our systems a lot of the time. It's societal failure, but it's not failure as caregivers. So let's see. Oh, there's a little thing. People with FASD can benefit from polyvagal. Of course, they're human. They have nervous systems. Everyone can benefit from it. But when we're talking with our kids, when we can describe out loud what we're learning about ourselves and what we need, and we can show ourselves going, wow, I feel really overwhelmed right now. I need to go take a little break. We're showing our kids what it is to listen to ourselves, and we're teaching them how to use words to self-advocate. It normalizes asking for help, and it normalizes that stress happens and that we need help for recovery. I like a couple of other things, but I think that I'm done. I want to just make sure that we have time for questions.
Yeah,
So I'm going to stop my
we still
share.
have about 5 minutes.
Wow, I used way more than I expected to.
So what I'm going to do is turn on everyone's capacity to turn on their video. Hopefully that worked.
We
And
stop the
you
recording.
yep, I'm gonna stop the recording and then, sorry, one second.